guys, how you going? Sitting down BKRsport. It is season review time. We are into the top 8 now. We have filmed all of the bottom 9. So if you are just watching this one and haven't checked out our season reviews yet, we've done the Tigers, the Rabbitohs, the Eels, the Titans, the Warriors, Broncos, Dragons, Dolphins, and the Raiders. So now we're at the serious point of the season reviews where we are getting into the finals. We are getting into teams who obviously have been eliminated from finals, but also had a pretty decent enough year. You know, they had a decent enough year where they put themselves into contention. They put themselves into a position where they could actually go all the way. Obviously, you know, if you're seeing this now, then obviously they haven't gone all the way. However, point matter is that we have gone past that bottom 9, and now we're starting to get into a few more of the positive side of things. I wouldn't say that today's one is the most positive for sure, because there are, I would say this, okay, so today, guys, obviously, as you know, we're doing the Newcastle Knights, and, you know, this is going to be a very similar review, I would say, to the Raiders, because obviously both these two teams finished on the exact same amount of points. It came down to points differential, and there is a lot of similarities between the two seasons, and it does kind of come down to their matchups against each other overall. But at the end of the day, you know, there is a lot more positives than what you're going to see from down here, despite the fact that I did tell you that there is going to be more improvements from those bottom 9 teams anyway. But, like I said, we're doing the Newcastle Knights today, guys. If you haven't seen one of these before, we do the positives, the negatives, the going into this year, during this year, and also we talk about what could go right next year, what could go wrong next year, and all in between, right? So I give you my full review of what's going on at each individual club. So, in regards to the Newcastle Knights here, they were the middle ground. But on the upper middle ground, because there's 17 teams, it does mean that this is the upper end of the lower middle ground, and this is the lower end of the upper middle ground. But they're still middle ground. They're still right dead smack in the middle of everybody else, where they did enough to get into the 8, but they didn't do enough to actually progress past that point and, you know, put a serious push into the finals and serious push on the big time teams. And for a long time, and this wasn't even the Newcastle Knights, but for a long time, throughout my streams, as you guys know, I stream pretty much every game, I knew that whoever was going to come 8th was obviously going to get knocked out first week, and the teams above them were just better. And that didn't matter whether it was the Knights, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Dragons, Broncos, Warriors, Titans, whatever, right? Whoever finished in 8th position, throughout the entirety of the season, you could see they were a little bit off the pace in regards to the better teams. Like, Manly, obviously, were better. They had 33 points. They had an extra win there, plus also the draw, which is close enough to 14 wins there. So, like, a draw, you could argue for a win or a loss, right? But the fact of the matter is that a draw, I do look on the more positive side of things. You give them that extra point, and then they would have been on 34, which is 4 points and 2 wins above where the Knights were. And they're the best of this middle bunch. Wrong one to click. Oh, no, I've clicked the wrong thing here. They're the best of this bunch here, obviously, right? What I'm saying right now is very clear and very definitive and very obvious. However, it does need to be spoken about there to say that anyone who finished below 7th just isn't exactly where they need to be in regards to making a serious push. And obviously the Knights in the first week did take on the Cowboys, which we will get to, and they were actually decent enough in it, you know, and they were going up well against a high attacking team and a pretty bad defensive team, and the Knights gave it a really solid crack, which is a great positive, and it does show the tenacity that Newcastle do have, because I see the Knights and the Raiders as two individual teams, right, that aren't in the big cities of Sydney, Brisbane, Goldie, Melbourne, New Zealand in general. I know Auckland, but I'm just using New Zealand as the Warriors, right? They're not in the big cities where a lot of chatter happens about these teams. You know, they're not exactly spoken about at great length because they're not a part of the mainstream corporation, right? They're not part of the mainstream cities that encompass, I don't know what the population is of Newcastle and Canberra, but the point matter is that there are individual teams that are outside of the big cities. They're still a sizable city, but just not like the Sydneys, the Brisbanes and Melbournes and whatnot, right? So the Knights don't get spoken about at great length, and these two teams can easily fly under the radar throughout the year. But when it comes to coming into this position here, 8-9, there's no other teams that I would expect to be here. To be completely honest with you, these two teams just love to flatline, right? And I wouldn't say the Knights were as flatlined as the Raiders were, as we did in our previous review, but they are close enough to that flat line, and that's what you get. You get into 8th position. Now, let's get into this ladder here. So, obviously, the Knights finished on 30 points, same amount of points as the Raiders, 3 points below Manly in 7th. They had 12 wins compared to the 13/14 here, or you could even argue you know, the 13 slash... no, it would just be 13 anyway, right? So you could just get the extra loss here if you'd really like to put it that way. And then they would have only been 2 points below them. Yeah, that's great. But also you look at this and you see the points differential of plus 113. And it does show to you the clear difference between the minus 40 here and the minus 127 here of the teams that were trying to push up there, right? So this is clearly and definitively the worst points differential in the top 8. Because you look at everybody else... 89 is the worst, plus 89. So that is, you know, effectively a 100 switcheroo. Effectively, 120 switcheroo off the top of my mind, right? And that's the second worst points differential in the top 8. So it did show you the clear difference there. Obviously, the team right above them was a massive, that was like 150 odd switcheroo. These guys who were very good defensively, not so great attacking wise, they obviously finished a decent amount above them as well. So the point that I'm making here is that yes, they made the 8. Yes, they got in. But there's a very clear and definitive reason as to why the concerns were valid about whoever was getting into this top 8 here. And minus 127, minus 1 for the Dolphins was fine. We've gone through their review already. Minus 126, minus 70, minus 62 here. Titans minus 168, all the way down here. You can't see the bottom 2, I don't believe. But anyway, overall, this is a real key area to show why they were distant from these guys. Now, you go into their attack this year. No, you know what? Actually, no, we will speak about the attack first. So they scored 470 points, which is another thing that separates it because all these teams much better attacking-wise. The Bulldogs have been under a lot of the microscope this year in regards to their attack and how they've struggled so significantly, and yet they beat them out by 59 points, nearly 60 points. The Bulldogs still scored nearly 60 points more than Newcastle Knights. And to hone in on this is the second worst attack in the entire competition. So we'll scroll down a little bit so you can see these bottom 2 teams as well. So 470 is worse than the Raiders, who were third last, mind you. And then also 463 of the Tigers. That is the only team the Knights scored more points than this year. The only team that Newcastle scored more points than this year was the West Tigers at 463. And it was only by 7 points. 7 points. That is a disaster. That is a disaster. And I know they're in this top 8, but that is a disaster to only beat out the 3-time Wooden Spoon champions by 7 points on the attack. So that's a crucial part that we have to look at there in regards to Newcastle. To come second last in attack is extremely concerning and extremely worrying. But they made up for it here with their defense, which was pretty solid, right? The only teams that beat out them defensively were... obviously the Bulldogs, the Sharks, Roosters, Panthers, and Melbourne. So that means that they were top 5 for the defense in the comp. So how do you have the drastic difference of second last to top 5? It blows my mind. It blows my mind because although these guys were third last here, that's also not absolutely horrific in regards to the defensive. So it's a lot more of that flatline, which is what I was saying. So this is just such a crucial differential here. Crucial differential. And obviously, like I said, the minus 40, but that's not the point. Because realistically, that's good. Really good from Newcastle, which is a point in emphasis that they are gritty, they're a grindy team that just know how to get results. But they are also a very strong team at the back end of the year, comparatively to the first part of the year, which means they have to chase that gritty and grindy nature. They do have to chase the results towards that middle and back end, like we saw last year with that 2023 run, right? So we'll go back here. So they had 30 points, 12 wins, and 12 losses this year. 2023, the Knights, they finished in the top 5 with 14 wins, 9 losses. But, again, that came down to the last back end of the year. They played, so they had 10, I think it was 10 wins in a row. So they won 9 straight in the regular season to put them into this position of the top 5, which is great. And then obviously they took on the Raiders, who are a very similar team in the context of how these two teams play. Similar, not the same, similar. And then beat them in a really close, grindy game, which they know how to do here, this Knights team. And then the week after, obviously got flogged by the Warriors over there in New Zealand, who were a red-hot team last year. So you go and have a look here, though, attacking-wise, 626. That is a significant amount more. 2023 or 2024. So the Knights scored 470 points here. And then in 2023, you go to 626 points. That is an insanity of a difference. Insanity. That's 150 odd points that separates them. And then in regards to the defense, 510 against there in 2024, and in 2023, they had 451. So this isn't changing too much, right? It changes by about 60. It does change by about 60 on the worst side of things there for the Knights. But this is the polar difference where you aren't seeing, and they are similar-ish years, right? I know they came 5th here, which is great, but they are similar-ish years, except for this attacking marker, which does, for me, prove to point that they need to figure out their spine. And I know that Kalen Ponga has been injured. Don't get me wrong. I'm very well aware that Kalen Ponga has been injured for parts of the year, large parts of the season and whatnot, which we'll get into the draw in a second. But that cannot drop off by 150 points, and that comes down to the halves, in my personal opinion. I know Jaden Brayley's also been injured, but you've been using Phoenix Crossland. I guess the spine has been tampered with quite significantly, whether by choice at the first part of the year. I think the first half of the year, they went through halves pairings like no tomorrow. There was Jackson Hastings. I think they went through Will Price at one stage. They have Tyson Gamble. I don't think Ponga was a part of the early season. In regards to the halves, I think that was last year more so, and then they realised that wasn't working. I don't think Newcastle know who their halves are. I don't think they do know. And then let's actually just quickly look here at this final game of the season, who their halves obviously ended up being, which was different to a lot of the year, which was Jack Cogger as well and Phoenix Crossland. So we're talking throughout this season in their halves, they've had Cogger, they've had Crossland, they've had Jackson Hastings, they have had Will Price, they have had Tyson Gamble, and it's not like Jackson Hastings or whatnot was injured here, because I don't think he was injured later on. I think they just decided to go away from him. Obviously, Gamble's still here because he's playing in that 14 role. So this is the biggest issue that I'm looking at right now in regards to Newcastle. That although they've got Jaden Brayley, who I believe is off the Yields, if I'm not mistaken, so they really need to hone on that hooker, which I would assume would be Crossland. And obviously their fullback is absolutely locked down. There's no worries about that one. The biggest key area is this, because, and we'll get into it later, but this 2 through 5 there of Greggy Martiu, Dylan Lucas, not usually Dylan Lucas, Bradman Best, Dan Gagai, and Fletcher Sharp is really solid. Like that is a solid backline. That 1 through 5 is really solid there for Newcastle. So the biggest case of emphasis based off of this ladder, is the attack, which is obvious. But the key reason to that is whether it be injuries, which every team goes through, or not, you did decide throughout the season to adjust that halves pairing so frequently, and you need to be consistent with your spine, specifically in regards to your halfback and your 5'8". So I think that's clearly the biggest issue for Newcastle in 2024, and I do think it shows that if they had have came together and picked a consistent halves pairing, this would have risen, and they would have risen. This would have risen, and they would have risen. So that's what I say there in regards to this ladder positioning. I get they made the 8. That's a positive, sure. But like I said in the Canberra Raiders review, do you want to be a part of the conversation and just kind of compete? Or do you want to actually be a genuine contender? Because if you're happy being in the top 8 and in 8th position, playing one extra week and then get knocked out, then sure, that's fine. Then great season for you. But in my personal belief, you want to win the premiership. You want to find that way to progress. And this current style, where they don't know their halves, to be completely honest, is not going to increase your ladder positioning. It's going to keep you exactly where you are, because you have the stability, you have the foundation at Newcastle, especially with some solid enough forwards. I love Leo Thompson. You know, you've got a good backline and whatnot, but it comes down to the halves. That's the issue with the attack, because attack comes down to spine, specifically like your halfback and your 5'8", to float around the field and direct the play. That's the issue there for Newcastle. All right, so let's go through their season. Obviously, you know, we see that their back end of the year, again, is quite strong, even in this game, but we'll get here in a bit. So you go back to the start of the year, and they always start off really, really slow. And it's confusing, yeah, because the Raiders were not expected, I don't believe the Raiders were expected to be above the Knights this year, but the Knights weren't expected to be exactly fantastic coming into 2024, sorry. Don't get me wrong, but this is a key loss there that I know they make up for it later in the year, but at home, I don't think you should be losing that first game there as convincingly as that to a Raiders team that people expected to be bottom 4 and were quite flatlined throughout the season. But then again, two very similar mindsets there. I'm okay with that one, but it's just key and emphasis that you struggled at the beginning of the year. You lose the game 21-20 to the Cowboys by a close margin. This game is impacted by, I think Storm were without Jerome Hughes. I think they were without Harry Grant or Munster and whatnot. There was a few players out there, so I didn't really see a great deal of quality from that. However, it is still a win. You can only play who's in front of you. It's not your fault for injuries to the other team. At least you got the dub. But it was a little bit concerning at the time that you still only just beat them by 2 when there were a lot of excuses there for Melbourne. But you were tinkering with that half, right? You were tinkering with the halves to try and figure out who you guys were in the halves. And then to round out the first 4 games, you obviously go and lose to the Warriors over there in New Zealand to start their season off 0-2 and then went 2-2 inclusive of you. So they were very up and down as well, the Warriors, especially at the beginning part of the year after their first 2-game heartbreak against the Sharkies and the Warriors. And then I think they beat the Raiders. I think the Raiders there and then you guys in round 4. So the Warriors, they went through the 2 teams that came 8 and 9 pretty convincingly, which is really key to think about because this team wasn't that great this year, but we're still able to beat both the 2 teams in the serious contention area. Yeah, I know the Dolphins were included and whatnot, but point matter is that that's not a good start. Even inclusive of this, the result's great, context matters, but that's not a fantastic start, which is what I'm saying. The Knights always start off slow and then come home like a train, which you don't want. You don't want to have to rely upon the back end of the year. You want to be comfortable. You want to be able to, set the foundations and the platform for yourself early on in the year and then be able to move and groove and then pump home strong late on, right? As soon as you do that, you guys can be up there in the top 6. As soon as you do that, you can look at a home final again like you did last year. But until then, this is where you've really got to sort it out because you set the foundations for a losing year from that. And I know that, this isn't technically losing because it's 12-12. It's close enough. It's close enough. Again, it's 12-12. It's 50-50, flat line. But it's close enough. And this is what is the biggest issue in regards to that. So then we go into round 5 onwards. Obviously, you beat the Dragons well, which is to be expected in that situation. I know the Dragons were just, oh man, you go and have a look at their review. They are the most inconsistent team that has ever existed. But this was to be expected. This is a good game against the Roosters team that you only lost by 2. I know that the result didn't go your way, but you only lost by 2 points there. You haven't started off the season that great at home, actually. You won this game, so you're 1-0. Then you're 1-1 0-1, and then you're 1-1 over the Storm. You're 2-1, and then you're 2-2 here. So it's not too bad of a start, but it's not great, especially considering Donald Trump Stadium. Solid enough stadium, and you guys believe that you've got a real good home advantage there. So I'm actually okay with that result. This one's not great, especially considering the Bulldogs really struggled defensively this year. The Bulldogs were one of the worst teams in the 8, actually the second worst attacking team in the top 8, with 529 to your 470. So they're only about 60 odd more than you, like I spoke about, right? So conceding 36 there, and also you only scored 12 points, which showed the Bulldogs' defensive side. That's not fantastic. You shouldn't be giving 36 points out of the Dogs. Don't worry. I'm a Titans fan. My team got flogged by the Dogs too. That's not the point. The point is that we're not top 8. You're top 8, and that's not exactly fantastic. But then obviously, you go and beat the Dolphins 18-14. You go and beat the Warriors 14-8. You go and beat the Tigers 20-14. And then you go and controversially, I will throw this out there. You know it, Brian Kelly scored. But anyway, you go and controversially beat the Titans, right? So regardless of that, and then you go into the bye. So that's a fantastic period here. That is a fantastic period that shows who you are, that you can grind out results. Yes, you're expected to win this game, and yes, you're expected to win this game. This game is 50-50, and this game, the Dolphins were pretty good this year, and also is 50-50. You did beat them twice, however, which ultimately got you into the finals, and the Dolphins not into the finals. So this is not a great stretch, despite that Dragons game. Don't really care too heavily about that. This is okay, and you're okay with the result considering that you actually gave it a good old solid crack, but then you really mustered up some great courage here to win a key part of the year, which was the middle part inclusive of Magic Round there against the the Titans one there. So yes, this one was a hard watch for you, but that going into the bye, so out of 5 games there, inclusive of the bye, you then get the 10 points on offer. So that's really huge. And you start to think, okay, this season might be starting to go the right way now. We're getting on a bit of a roll. We're starting to really get that momentum, which is what the Knights are great for. When they get the momentum, they roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. And that's what I look at as the most impressive part of this year that set you back up for a good push towards the back end. Because that opening 7 rounds, actually, let's just quickly go here and have a look at the opening 7 rounds here for you. So after round 7, the Knights were sitting in third last. They were in third last position. They're in third last. So that's a key point to say your beginning part of the season, you had 2 wins from your first 5. 2 wins from your first 5. And that is the emphasis. But then after round 12, after you went on that little run, so you went from having 2 wins and 5 losses through your first 7 games to round 12, where you're now back up in the top 7. You went from third last to the top 7 based on that little mid-season stretch. You had 2 wins, now you got 6, and you hadn't lost since. So that's a really, really incredible point of your year that set you up for the back end. So you love that. But again, if you had have just had a bit more consistency through that first 7 rounds, you would be in the top 4 at this point. Like this team, like the Dolphins, who finished below you this year. You know, Broncos, who also finished well below you this year. The Knights beginning part of the season is the biggest issue. Now, after this bye, you go on a bit of a losing stretch against really good teams, though. So this isn't a great period, but it's also kind of like, oh, okay, I get it period. With that being said, it really clearly defined to you that you aren't going to be winning the comp this year, and clearly defined to you that you aren't going to be pushing too far deep into the finals, because you lost to the Dogs there 32-2. You conceded 36 points to the Storm. You scored 28, which is great, but you still conceded 36 points there. And then you lost 26-18 to the Panthers before you went into that bye. This is not a good stretch result-wise, but also it's an okay, I understand it. But if you think you're a genuine team, you should be picking up at least one of those wins. At least one of them, if not 2. One of them you would have hoped to have been that game, and then maybe this game here at home, or this one because you beat them already earlier in the season. And you were close enough there as well. You were close enough here as well. So you competed, but you're just off the mark. You competed, but you're just off the mark. With these 2, not with this one. So again, not a great results there, but it's showing like that stretch is really difficult. Don't get me wrong. But then you obviously get into a bye, you refresh, you beat the Eels, you beat the Raiders. Decent enough 2 wins there, especially this one, because you needed to win this. Because if you had lost this game, mind you, back in round 18, you would have finished in 9th position, because the Raiders, they had the same amount of points as you. So you needed that win desperately against your biggest rivals for the top 8, realistically. Yeah, I understand this team is here, but you beat them as well. So the 2 teams that you needed to beat, and we'll get into the Dolphins in a second, but the 2 teams you needed to beat, you did. So that shows that you can get up for those big games in the crucial parts. Eels, whatever, you shouldn't be conceding 26 points to them, but these 2 games at least gets you back on track. You lose 44-6 here to Manly. You never should have been losing 30-14 there to the Broncos. Bye, and then into round 22 with a loss. Round 22 with a loss to the Panthers, which is fine. Again, you lost both games by 8 points. Means you're in the fight though against the Panthers throughout the year, who also had no Nathan Cleary for the most part. But this should never be happening, and also that shouldn't be happening. Manly were a decent enough team this year. Not a great stretch here, right? So again, you're setting that foundation up with having to chase. So after round 22 this year, you are in 12th position. You are in 12th. So we obviously know you finish in 8th, but you're in 12th. So that means that you have to really put all kind of emphasis into this back stretch. And you are renowned for doing that. You are able to do that, but you have to rely on other teams losing. You have to rely on real crucial games. This one obviously would have hurt you because it was a good performance there by the Knights to nearly go over the Sharks, which obviously didn't happen. But again, it just comes back to the chasing, which puts all point of emphasis, and you do get tired from it. You do. Your team does get exhausted from the emphasis there. So you beat the Tigers, that's great. Obviously, you just lose to the Sharks in a tough one. You beat the Rabbitohs. You whooped my team. My team was awful that day. You beat the Dolphins, which was the key one that you needed to win, because whoever won that game would make the 8, yeah? So winning this one shows, again, you can get up for the games that you need to. But I think that this stretch here, all the way from this Tigers game, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that 5-game stretch there of needing to win, the desperation of winning and putting all emphasis and effort into those last, that final season stretch, under the precipice that if you do not win, then you will be out, does tire you out for this game. Because the Cowboys were fine for the finals pretty much from the halfway point of the year. Pretty much. So that means they didn't need to put as much emphasis into every single moment comparatively to the Newcastle Knights, who had to chase the season. Again, it's a great back end of the year, and you love to see it from your boys. But the effort needs to be 150% every single game. I'm not saying that you don't have to have effort regardless, right? But I'm just saying there can be games where if you don't need the win, your results kind of solidified, you're going to be a finals team, you can slow it down a bit, give your body a little bit of a rest, and it won't be too impactful for the back end of the year, and actually benefits you for the back end of the year. Yeah, and that's a big issue that I found with my Titans this year, is that because they went 0-6, they had to chase the season from the outset, and that's why you saw them absolutely capitulate right at the back end of the year after a great stretch against the Warriors, the Broncos, the Dolphins, the Sharks, the Eels, and all that type of stuff, right? Had a great middle stretch. But then when they got to the back end of the year, they were exhausted because they put every bit of effort into every game. So that's why I feel like the second half of this game really fell apart for you. Cowboys obviously were heavy favourites going into this game, and you did well. I did like what the Knights did in that game. I did tip the Cowboys, but I thought the Knights would be up for it just to kind of keep that momentum rolling, which they did up until the first half finished, and the Cowboys just came over the top of them. And I do think that comes down to just being exhausted from the season and the pressure. Pressure's good, but you are exhausted by this point because of everything you've needed to put into that back end. So that's my biggest issue with the Knights. I think that would be such a solid enough team in this top 6 area. I don't think like a top 2, even top 3, but like 4 through 6 is an area the Knights can really, I'll go 3 through 6, the Knights can really capitalize on. They can really look to capitalize on, I should go to the round 27 here so it doesn't confuse you. They can really capitalize on this 3 through 6, because the Knights finish on 12, top 3 finish on 16, that's 4 games. Maybe you don't get those extra 4 games, but if you get at least 2, if you get at very least maybe 2, if maybe not 3 against that early part of the year, then you probably do still finish in this area, because you don't get as many wins at the back end of the year when you solidify for a position. But it just gives you a lot more sense of belief from the outset, and it just gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to kick back on occasion slightly to knock 170% every single game. That's my personal thoughts. If you disagree with it, please comment it below. But that's what I take from that season. And we get into the contract situation. Interesting one here. There's a mutual option for Dane Gagai in 2027. Any other options that I can see? Tyson Frizzell has a player option and then a mutual option. Player option 2025, mutual option 2026. Besides that, there's a couple of guys. Obviously, Armstrong's gone. Bro Jones is fine. Anari Tuala, I think he's gone as well. Mapapalangi, it's okay. Croker, it's okay. Miles Martin, I think he's gone to the Raiders. I think I saw in the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Everyone else has still got at least next year, but there's a real solid mix between 2025 and 2027, clearly. Yes, there's some 2026s here, but there is a pretty solid mix between the 2025s and 2026s. So this contract situation does show there's a lot of option to change for Adam O'Brien, who I don't believe you should have given like a 5-year extension after he had that back end of the year last year, because I still am concerned about Adam O'Brien. At least Brown Bessie got long term. Dane Gagai obviously got long term. You've got plenty of time to think about that. I think Daniel Saifidi might be off to the Dolphins. I could be wrong. Sharp 2026, he was a good find. Greg Matthew and Jack Cogger 2026. Saifidi 2027. Ponga 2027. Interesting situation around Callum Ponga, but he is locked down. It just comes down to if the Knights would release him early, but he is signed on 2027. Cross in 2026. Basically, here you've got the ability to change parts of your team throughout. right? Unless you decide to release players early. But you've got the ability. It's not like they're all just 1 year where all the big contracts are due for the big time players of the team. You're not stressed about a certain year incoming. It is quite a mixture. It is quite a mixture there. So I don't mind that for the Newcastle Knights contract situation. At least they're in, like, they're pure big time players are the long term in 2027. Bradman Best. Those two guys you're really looking at in Callum Ponga and Best. Kai Pearce-Paul, you'll re-sign him. But there is a lot of change coming at Knights, I feel. I feel like there could be quite a bit of change. I feel like there could be. This is an issue, player option-wise. Obviously, it's his decision. But all right, development list. Fletcher Myers, heard the name. Sebastian Silva, not too sure about. Laitia Modondreki, who I believe played for Fiji in the last World Cup. Thomas Kant, who came from the... Was he from the Panthers? No, I'm thinking of Thomas Jenkins. And Zach Herring. Don't know a great deal about these guys, except for maybe Laitia Modondreki. Don't know a great deal. I guess it comes down to what I said in the Canberra Raiders review, where because they're not a big-time city, there's not a great deal of chatter about the up-and-coming hype players, but we have seen guys come through the system like David Armstrong this year, who's obviously left, and Fletcher Sharp. So no one really had heard of these guys before coming in, besides family and really internal Knights fans, and they've come out and they've done a great job. David, fantastic until he left, and Fletcher Sharp then comes in and does a fantastic job, who I do really like as a player, and scored 4 tries in the game this year. So regardless of if you don't know them or not, I should have also mentioned Leo Thompson. Love him as a player. Sign him past 2025. But yeah, it's okay. I don't know a great deal about these guys. I can't really talk too heavily about the development list here for Newcastle because there just isn't a great deal of hype coming out of them. This is the only one I really know about in Laitia Modondreki, but we'll wait and see. But these guys are all at 2024, so they need to figure out the development list now. Again, if this changes, guys, and there's updates and whatnot, I'm only going via the NRL.com website right this very second. Things may change. Don't get me wrong. And then, yeah, Sebastian Stewart, obviously, you've got until next year. So it's okay. It's nothing spectacular, the development list that we know of, but we'll wait and see. 2024 gains. So they got Kai Pearce-Paul coming this year from the Wigan Warriors, Will Price from the Giants in Huddersfield, Jack Cogger from the Panthers, Jed Cartwright from the Rabbitohs, and Tom Jenkins from the Panthers. These two don't really care too much about. I don't think anyone really expected a great deal out of Jed Cartwright, and Tom Jenkins had a little bit of hype coming from the Panthers, but I think we all knew that it wasn't necessarily the biggest play there. They did need a winger with the loss of Dom Young here, but I don't think it was necessarily a huge, play at all by the Knights, so I don't really care too much about that. Kai Pearce-Paul, like him, played for international for England and whatnot. Will Price, young, like him, but I don't know how high they are on him, to be completely honest with you, because they just don't know who their halves are. Is it going to be Will Price? He can't play fullback, obviously, because Callum Ponga's there. I don't know. It's just a really interesting situation. The same goes for Jack Cogger, who obviously was getting more time than not for this team. But I do like the addition of these 3 guys. I don't think it's the best signings that we've ever seen. It's not like the highlight of the NRL in regards to signings coming this year. Kai Pearce-Paul was a good one, though. That was a mainstay in their team. He was in and out, and he was kind of in and out. But maybe just a little bit too early there for Will Price. So it's okay. I think their gains were fine. There's no problem with their gains. There's no problem with their gains, in my personal opinion. But there's a lot of losses here, as you can see. Dom Young to the Roosters, Lachlan Fitzgibbon to the Warrington Wolves, Simi Sasanga to the Raiders, Lachlan Miller to the Leeds Rhinos, Fa'amanu Brown to Hull FC, who I believe is now with the Dragons, Oren Kelly to the Dolphins, Kurt Mann to the Bulldogs, Dane Alcafalau to the Northern Pride, Heimel Hunt unsigned, Jack Johns unsigned, and Jed Cartwright, Hull FC. So Jed Cartwright comes in and Jed Cartwright comes out. That's point in what I was saying. This is the only significant loss in my personal opinion, because he had a great year last year, but he couldn't do too much to keep him. He wanted to go to the Roosters where he felt like he could win a premiership and whatnot, and the Roosters are the Roosters, right? This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. Definitely fine. Definitely fine. Big loss, because he did have a great year for the Dogs this year. He did have a great year. Not too sure about. That's fine. That's fine, and that's absolutely fine. But then it just didn't make any sense here. So, this is the only real significant one that you take out of this. But it's a winger. And then you found David Armstrong and you found Fletcher Sharp. So this doesn't matter that great. It doesn't matter that much of a deal. So this is okay again. And you are trying to change Like, he did come fifth. He didn't need to make a significant amount. But with that being said, like, these are fine losses. And these are fine gains, except for there. And whatever. So it's okay. It's the 2024 gains and losses as a collective, it's fine. You don't lose sleep over it, but you're also not going out in the town partying over it, is my personal opinion. Now, on here, it has no gains for the Knights next year, which is a concern. I don't know if there is an update to this, but 2025 losses, Miles Martin and David Armstrong, these are both okay. Again, you found Fletcher Sharp to cover for that anyway. It's interesting that he just packed up and left, though, effectively. I don't know a great deal about that. And Miles Martin to the Raiders was fine. If there's no gains, this doesn't matter. Like, regardless of that, this doesn't matter. There's no significant loss here. But surely there's some gains coming, because there was a massive haul here. So obviously the Knights are really trying to adjust. Are they just planning to go through their youth development? Are they just planning a raid somewhere in the off season that could come? I don't know. We'll obviously do a preview about them later on at the beginning of the next year. But yeah, intriguing that, because this is whatever. This is okay, and then no gains is obviously not great, but we don't know what's going on there. So overall, not a great deal to talk about here. There's not a fantastic amount to talk about. It's not a fantastic amount to talk about, but we'll see how it goes. So look, overall, I think in regards to the Knights, the key points here, you need to figure out your start of the year, because you set yourself up for an exhausting back end that will tire you out by the time you get to finals, as we saw last year and this year, in my personal opinion. But select your halves. Know your halves and stop chopping and changing. Stop chopping and changing unless there has to be due to an injury. Because there was a lot of selective decision making at the beginning of the year, and I don't feel like they ever really found their pairing. I don't feel like it was ever guaranteed that, yes, we want to go with Cogger, and yes, we want to go with, who was it at the end? Crossland. Or yes, you want to go with Jackson Hastings. Yes, you want to go with this. Too much chopping and changing in the halves. That's their biggest issue, which I think really does put into point that first part of the year, but also shows why their attack was the second worst attack in the competition this year. Because, and this is something for the Knights fans out there, this doesn't mean shit. And this doesn't mean shit in regards to your attack, because you played second last in the Rabbitohs and you played a Titans team that was fourth last, and which both defenses being awful. So that doesn't mean jack. And even this doesn't mean jack. Where you gained most of your points this year was coming from 34 points against the Tigers, 36 points against the Rabbitohs, and 36 points against the Titans. So there is nothing to write home about. So that's the two biggest issues. And I'll add a third in a second. But the two biggest issues, start of the year, sets up a bad foundation for your year. Your halves all over the shop. Select your halves and know your halves and know what direction you want to go in regards to your spine. And the third one is, I don't believe you should have signed Adam O'Brien to a long-term extension based off of 10 games at the back end of last year. I don't believe it. But what do I know? You know, what do I know? Because he was under the chopping block until that moment. So, I don't know. Anyway, the Knights are an interesting team. I do have more hope in the Raiders going forward based off of the previous review. I do. The Knights next year could... There is some positives if they can... Like I said, they could finish 3rd through 6th with their team. If they can sort their halves situation out and bump this attack up, they could absolutely finish in that 3 till 6. But I don't think they know who they want to go with, and I don't think the guys that they've put there have necessarily worked out for them, which means that they need to adjust. Which means they could go back into this bottom 9. They could. They're a very up and down team, Newcastle. They rely too heavily on the back end of the year. So the Knights are going into a really weird situation in 2025 where if they can sort it out, they are a 3 through 6 team. But if they don't, they could, and I'm saying they could finish in the bottom 4. They could. They could if it doesn't go to plan. But they do love a mid-range section. They do it. They do love a mid-range section. So good luck with your Knights fans. That's my opinion of your season in 2024. Obviously, if you have a different opinion, whether you agree, disagree, slightly disagree, please jump into the comment section. Let me know exactly your thoughts. I'm eager to hear what you have to say. Whether you're a Knights fan or not a Knights fan, doesn't matter. Obviously, guys, hit that like button. Subscribe if you are new around here. And yeah, look, we've obviously got 7 more teams to go. The next one that we'll obviously be doing is the Canterbury Bulldogs, which will be a very interesting one to look at there. But I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Like I said, we've done 10 of these now. We've done 10 of these now. And we keep on moving and we keep on grooving. So like I said, thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya.